Good afternoon, everyone. So that brings us to the last panel, but an interesting one on Beyond 2024, predicting the next decade of innovation. So I'd like to invite my fellow panelists. I'll start with Mohamed Jamsheer, the Group Head of IT of Baraka Banking Group. Go with Sridhar, Iyer, the Chief Group Digital Officer and Digital Head of Consumer Bank for Gulf International. Sridhar. My next panelist comes from a very interesting field around big data and analytics. I'd like to invite Mohamed Abdelmajid from Bank Ila. My last panelist is Head of Business Development for Khaleeji Bank, Maytham Abbas. Very warm welcome. So thanks for joining, panelists. It's a very interesting question. Prediction is always difficult when it comes to the next generation digital bank and innovation on banking. Because as all of you know, 5 years back, if I would have asked you, tell me what will be the next, I don't think we would have answered Gen AI, right? So Sridhar, my first question is, a lot of time predicting requires historical context. So shaping the future of the banking, how do you see Bahrain's banking landscape on digital side evolving in recent years? And what gap you believe which still needs to be addressed? I did highlight some white spaces earlier, but your experience will be very interesting to hear.
This is a question that we would have heard many times as to how is the digital landscape in Bahrain performing. And the answer also is something that we would have heard, is that the digital landscape in Bahrain is one of the most vibrant. And I'm saying this for 3 key reasons. If you look at the landscape, you can define it in many ways, but the landscape is predominantly made of 3 constituents or 3 components. The first is the regulations / infrastructure set up by the government. The second is the demography of the population itself. And third, we're talking about banking. So third is about what the banks are essentially doing on the digital landscape. So if you take the first part, which is the infrastructure and the government regulations, Bahrain by far is one of the most progressive digital infrastructure set up, as well as the digital reforms. And this has been borne out by a variety of studies where the infrastructure in Bahrain is world-class. Right? And I'll give you some examples. Since 2017 onwards, now about 7 years ago, every year almost something new has come up. We started off with benefits pay, then we started off with contactless, then we had the open banking reforms, then we had the AFAQ payment, then we had e-checks, then we had e-KYC. Some of these things we take for granted, but we must remember that these things are not easily available in other parts of the world, even in developed worlds, for example. In the US, to do instant payment transfer, it is still a struggle. So things that we take for granted in terms of benefits are stuff that has not happened in other parts of the world. So in terms of regulations and infrastructure, Bahrain is right up on the top. The second is the demography of the population here. Right? It is a small country, but it is a country that is very well digitally developed. The digital penetration here is touching 100%. That means everybody is digitally connected. The mobile phone penetration is almost 1.4, which means people have 1.5 mobile phones on an average. Right? The median age of this country is young. 35% is the median age. 35 years is the median age. So it is a young, vibrant country, fully digitally connected and doing transactions digitally. If you look at e-commerce, growing at about 35% year on year. This is tremendous growth for a country of this size. The bad thing about the country of this size is the market is small. The good thing is that things can happen very quickly in the country. And that is what we are seeing in terms of the demography. And finally, the banks. If you look at the banks, banks have been slow on the uptake in terms of digital, but now the pace is accelerating. Every aspect of the customer journey is now digitized. Acquisition today, almost all banks today have 100% digital acquisition. Some have assisted digital, but most have, at least for low involvement products like current accounts, savings accounts, it is fully digital. If you look at the engagement and transaction aspects, all payments are predominantly digital. Like, engagement in terms of customer service, the digital channels are almost 60 to 65% of the total engagement. So at every aspect of the customer journey, payments, for example, fully digital. Every aspect of the customer journey, this is happening. Now, if on top of this, if you overlay AI, ML, crypto, etc., the future is looking extraordinarily digital. Right? And if you're not digital, you die. That's the sort of image that's coming across in this country. But still, there are gaps, and the gaps are in areas like the SME, for example. SME penetration, digital penetration within the SME segment is still something is work to be done. Similarly, on some of the areas, especially the back-end STP, the front end normally gets done digitized, but the back-end processes, because they are hidden from the customer, they are the last to be automated, and STP programs happening there. So these are pockets of digital transformation that needs to happen. But overall, I think it's a very vibrant digital landscape and almost poised for a leap into the future.
So quite interesting. So vibrant, quick decision making, and growing. That's the key three messages. Mohamed, next I'll go to you, Mr. Jamsheer, around what you believe a bank should prioritize with so many agendas, so many innovation ideas. You spoke earlier about the banking systems. Somebody spoke about AI and machine learning. Foundation of any digital is a strong core banking. So when you look at as a group head of technology for Baraka, where do you see prioritization?
Assalamu alaikum. So I think the first question I would ask is, if you go to any head of IT and you tell him, would you like to change your core banking system? He will give you like the, painful face, because it's an open heart surgery and no one would like to do it. However, sometimes the core banking that the organization is using is not supporting the business, nor supporting the digital aspiration of the business to actually move forward. I like what the previous panel were saying, that sometimes you say, okay, put AI modeling and let's just connect it to the core, while the core is like a legacy system. 4 years they didn't evolve. We have actually a case within our group. One of our banks, they are actually managing their core banking. They have transformed, they actually have foresee that tech stack that they were using is extremely legacy, and they need to move into microservices and modular kind of tech stack. And because they have done that, today they are very scalable enough to support the business. So for you to change the core banking system, it's very important to say where you are, why you're changing. Are you changing just because of the business requirements, or sometimes there is limitation on the system itself? So when you choose a new system, you have to actually think about, first of all, flexibility. How flexible and scalable the system that you're gonna choose. First of all, is it cloud native? Is it based on the latest tech stack? Because you don't want to keep changing core every 5 years. I mean, you want to actually either never change core, okay, or at least 15 or 20 years. Next is integration capabilities. I've noticed that some core banking system, although they say that they have strong integration capabilities, when you actually go and dig deeper, for most of the integrations you have to go back to the vendor, and actually they will do it for you, which actually makes you not fast enough to respond to market. And especially sometimes nowadays the regulators in Bahrain is very much demanding. So that's an important aspect. And then data driven. So data driven insights is very important. We actually spoke about it throughout today. Some of these you actually have, again, to go to the vendor, ask them for reports, and they have to develop these reports for you. Where we've seen a lot of the new, let's say, next-gen core banking systems, they even have Gen AI integrated into the core, where the end user in the bank can talk in a normal language to the core based on their security permissions, and it will answer them the questions without even having to go back to the IT, because sometimes IT will take time to actually develop the data analytics for the business, and that can also delay. So these aspects are important. And then one last aspect that is, I think, is equally important is security. I mean, things are changing fast, so security needs to be properly integrated into such code that people choose.
Very, again, different perspective that do change code every 10 to 15 years, but look at things very differently. On next 10 years, that will be interesting. Moving to Abdul Majid, you have been doing a real next generation work at Iyer. As you know, Iyer has innovated and introduced products which customers have loved, right? And looking at from your perspective, big data analytics, which technology, including AI or analytics, do you see most disruptive as you go forward?
So before I answer the question, I'll go back in time, and if we look at the past decade, we've seen the remarkable transformation that actually happened on the fintech industry. When we got hit by the pandemic, we've seen how banks react into that transformation, and at the same time, the most important piece, we've looked at it, it's basically how customer adopt to the technology and how they basically able to use technology. If you compare the customer needs and also the use of technology before and after COVID globally, has completely been changed, and basically that the technology was exist, but the time wasn't the right time to build that one. So that takes me to your question. Now, looking at the next couple of decades and what we could predict of where the services or where the banking or the fintech industry will go, I will emphasize again on the data and the AI part, because in my opinion, this is basically what's going to redefine and shape the future of the banking. If I take a couple of examples from my colleague earlier when they talk about customer problem, where you look at basically banks with expertise, but you still have this fundamental problem. In the future, there are a couple of things that I can see what's going to happen. One is basically when we look at the technology from one aspect and we utilize it for, and what we do right now, we started already in it as a practice, is start using the hyper-personalization. And we talked a lot about this point today in a multiple forum, in the first panel and the second as well. It's really very important because it's time to understand exactly what the customer they need before they realize, and this is what the game changer is going to happen in the next decade. Because you don't need to wait until the customer came with a problem. You need to go further and predict what exactly is going to happen in the next couple of months or year, because you do have a lot. Banks has a lot of rich data. So if they connected, if they did a lot of work on it, I wouldn't say a lot of work on it, but if they do basics work on it, they will be able to solve a lot of problem. And if we gonna put an AI to it, we'll be able to go even further and start predicting what the need of the customer will do. Frankly speaking, today, customer, they're not expecting any more a basic service or financial. The demand and the expectation of the customer has been raised a lot, and they expected a seamless banking, they expected a personalized banking. Also, they expect security and accuracy. In the first panel, Paul, my colleague, is talking about if he wanted to do an international transaction, he wanted to make sure that he does this international transaction between Monday to Friday. But if he wanted to do something beyond that period of time, then he need to wait for the next couple of days. So there's a lot of opportunities that's going to be there in the next near future that AI and data analytics would help. If I just name a few of things that currently we do, in my opinion, this will be accelerated dramatically in the next couple of decades. One, hyper-personalization, which is, I already talked about it. Second, which is the autonomous financing, which is basically now industry started investing in automating the day-to-day business for banking, because there's a lot of manual work that's currently being done where you're talking about assessment when someone applying for a loan, or you do a risk assessment. You still have to rely on a basics fundamental data by looking at the scoring. But if you ingest data to that kind of model, you'll be able to go beyond that data and you look at the customer social, you look at the economical change, and then when you embedded all this data together in a one thing, you'll be able to decide in a faster way and in a more accurate way. So with that kind of aspect, when we look at all these elements, that basically what's going to shape and redefine and to operate how bank will basically going to be operate eventually in the next near future.
Interesting. So it's big data and AI being put to work. Maytham, you heard since morning about the product, services, customer expectation. People spoke around customer expectations. When you look at Bahraini customer and both expats as well as locals, how do you see the customer expectation changing in the coming years? Because they are exposed significantly to technology, to new generation OTT platforms. They are thinking, and as we heard earlier, it's 1.5 mobiles they already have, so they'll have potentially 2 mobiles or devices. So in that kind of situation, what customer expectation you see will change, and how do you think product and services should change for that?
Thanks. So I think, Bahrain is pretty much going through exactly the same changes in customer expectation that's happening everywhere. Probably no age has been so impacted by technology. If I look at social media, for example, you have companies who have billions of customers. It's probably one of the first times in history that you have, 50%, 60% of the population are sitting on the same platform, being able to see what's happening in different places in the world. And I think one of the impacts of this is the effect on the aspirational nature of consumers. So, if you tend to kind of benchmark yourself by what's next to you, right? If you're on your Instagram or whatever it is, and you're seeing people with luxury goods and all the rest of this, I think one of the aspects we're going to see, not in Bahrain, but because we're a relatively upper middle income country, but across the world, is a leaning towards more aspirational consumption habits, right? And that's also going to be reflected in the kind of life decisions people are making. And we're seeing it already in terms of demographic trends. If you see birth rates are going down, fertility rates are going down, several parts of the world it's already negative, etc. Because to be able to achieve that level of living, there's going to be a whole set of decisions made into how they live their lives, when they get married, how many children they have, when to buy a house, whether to buy a house, etc. And of course, all of this is going to have an impact on their consumption of banking services. So I see this as being one of the kind of global trends, so to speak, that's happening. And that's going to be impacting us over the long term, over the next 10, 20 years. The other thing we're seeing is that as people interact with these platforms, the expectations when it comes to like how they interact with a business, what they get from the business, what's a good deal, what's a bad deal, this is also changing, right? And I think a lot of the innovation we've seen, if you see, it's been remarkable, the changes in the last 5 years in terms of banking, digital technology, etc. Now, as you were saying, it's completely standard. Nobody expects to go to a branch. You do digital onboarding, you do everything through your mobile. I had 2 banks insist I come to the branch. Both of them I threatened I'd shut my account with them, and both of them I did, right? And I think a lot of people are becoming that fussy because they see there's a wealth of options out there. As another panelist mentioned, we're fundamentally kind of becoming lazier when it comes to these things. So I think the expectation is going to be, because it's always interesting to take these trends and take them to the extreme. So what's infinite lazy, right? Like what is absolutely zero effort, right? The way we kind of see it is that zero effort would be, nobody really wants to consume a banking service, right? Everyone is out to solve a problem, get a job done. I want to buy a car, right? I want to buy a house. I want to get married. I want to go on holiday. You know, and I think the first step is going to be seeing these customer journeys being innovated digitally, and then having the financial services embedded within that. Obviously, you know, a lot of these trends, from a banker's perspective, are a little bit scary. You know, as people choose to rent, not buy, there's not going to be as many mortgages, right? As people say, you know what, I don't really want a banking service, I just want a house, and you get, you know, platforms that get the kind of, you know, eyes on the screen that, say, for example, a Talabat has, there's a complete imbalance in the power play there, and you run the high risk of a complete commoditization of your financing products. As people get more educated, right, increasingly you expect to see people saying, you know, why am I keeping my money as cash? You know, all the financial education is telling me if I had it in stocks, I'd be averaging 10, 11% over the last 20 years, whereas in cash, I'm averaging 3, right? You know, well, the whole banking model is based on the fact that you have access to cheap cash. So the way I see it is we've got a lot of changes happening in terms of consumer behavior, in terms of consumer expectation, etc. And, you know, as banks, you know, of course, we play tactically today, right? Because you need to be around by the end of the year to worry about your strategy. But you also start thinking strategically how you want to place yourself tomorrow. You know, I'm in Khaleeji Bank now, and I'm kind of blessed to have a leadership team that's kind of quite forward-looking. And so when you go to them and speak like this, instead of being like, oh, it's all rubbish, right? They're actually very encouraging on figuring out how to place yourselves strategically. We do see that there is a place in the future for banking as a service. We think that structuring ourselves so that we can become embedded finance providers is probably a smart move as a smaller bank. You know, we think that's a good place to play going forward. It doesn't mean we're not playing in lots of other places too. But I think in terms of what we've already started doing, I mean, we've had our strategic relationship with STC is known. We have some other things in the works similar. So this is kind of both where we see things going, and this is also how we're playing. And I think a lot of those kind of, shall we call them macro trends, are going to pretty much dictate how banks have to play. And either you need to try and become more than just a bank, like almost the super app, so that you maintain the client coming through your door and you try and commoditize everyone else. Or you have to say that I'm going to have to become the preferred person to embed for access to financial services. I mean, this is high level the way I see it.
So, Maytham, interesting. So you're now not only saying customer is becoming global, not only Bahrain perspective, more educated, more demanding, and the next generation embedded finance kind of services. So let's put some money to it. Now we know what future looks like. So again, going back to Mohamed Jamsheer, when you have to do strategic priorities, you know, and as a group CIO, you have a budget and you have an accountability to start spending. Where do you see as a CIO, how are you going to split the money in the strategic priorities? You heard the priorities from the leaders.
Yeah, so I think data is the black oil of banks, where actually many banks are not really leveraging the data they have. So I think that's one priority that banks should focus on, and not only banks, all organizations. Innovation comes from data, strategy based on data, and you know, even personalization is based usually on the data you have. Second is cloud. Cloud, and in essence, I mean, I come from an organization where we actually function or run in some countries that are war-torn. Okay, and cloud actually is what actually keeping some of our subsidiaries running, because if you put it, on-prem, it's very risky. So with all the benefits of the cloud, continuity for us is very important, but also cloud brings the scalability, flexibility, and cost optimization as well. And then I think artificial intelligence is important. We've been talking about it. But we should not, again, do it only to say that, we are AI enabled or just based on AI. Actually, we should identify the business cases and the uses for AI in our organization and see where it applies. I think it will be very important in the future to personalize the customer experience. And that's let's say, tech priorities. However, there is one non-tech priority, which is the resources. So resources today and technology are in high demand, and unless we are able to keep them and incentivize them not only financially but also with latest technologies and making them sometimes function like a fintech, we might lose them. In addition to that, we have to have a proper pipeline of identifying tech talent, bringing them on board to organizations to ensure that we have continuity from human resources point of view.
So, Sridhar, next I'll move to you. You've heard trends, you've heard where money is being put. However, the money put without a strategic direction, right, in the business is not going to be helping. So what do you think is a competitive strategy in this situation that bank like yours can put in to succeed in the digital environment?
Like consultants, you would appreciate a model that goes into strategy, right? So just taking a leaf out of your book, any bank, not just GIB, any bank will look at its strategy based on the 3 C's. And the 3 C's being, what are competitors doing? What is the strength of my own company? And what does the customer want? So these 3 C's will determine what would the strategy be. Like Maytham suggested, if it is a small bank, you definitely can't say that, look, we are going to invest hugely in cloud and AI and so on and so forth, because then it becomes completely unaffordable. So banking as a service, embedded finance, these things make a lot of sense if it is a small and aspiring bank. If on the other hand, you're a really big bank, you want to set the tone in the market, then you will go with all these new technologies, experiment, park aside some funds for experimentation, create new revenue lines and so on. So depending on what the size of the bank is and the stage of evolution, the strategies will definitely change. Speaking from a GIB standpoint, we are quite committed to expanding on the retail footprint, which is where my role is. And we are looking at a variety of strategies, including banking as a service, including focusing on partners and how we can scale up with them. But technology will play, irrespective of the strategy that we use, technology will play a key part. Only because what we look at today as competition is not necessarily other banks. Customers' expectations from banks have been shaped by their experiences in a variety of other industries. So customers today don't look at us and say, look, some ABC bank is giving us this rate. They say that, look, Amazon delivers in 24 hours. Why can't you deliver a credit card in 24 hours? So they are expecting that banks will catch up with other areas in the industry while maintaining confidentiality and security. So that is what our competition really is. So we are looking at it from that standpoint.
Interesting. So it's a strategy based on size and your appetite as a bank. Moving to Mohamed, to you, Abdul Majid, what role do you think, given that big data analytics you mentioned earlier also in AI, how will cybersecurity play a role in innovation and these advanced technologies to safeguard the bank?
Yeah, good question. So I guess we kind of all agreed that AI, data analytics, it's exactly what's going to shape what the future will be for the financial industry and other industry too. Now, specifically, if I talk about the impact of cybersecurity on the innovation that's going to happen in the near future. Cybersecurity, everyone will agree that this is one of the critical pillar in any strategy when you grow with your data, where you grow where your business. Because if I talk specifically on fintech or any now even at the traditional bank, so the more they connected or the more they integrated with data, they move to the cloud. They connected with a lot of data points, as Michael mentioned just now, is that everyone now is in the social media, everyone. So social media has become a one data point. Your data, your transaction, it's become a one point. So the more banks are connected, the more are basically exposed to a threat. And on the other hand, what cyber criminal does is basically they start even leverage the AI to figure out a way sophisticated method to basically to attack you back. And this is what the importance of cybersecurity can, because I'm sure everyone in the room at any point, at some point in time, they have received a phishing email or a phishing campaign that try to steal some sort of their information to basically go back to their bank account. Now, the importance of cybersecurity, if I talk specifically of what we do at the moment, we put cybersecurity as a part of our data platforms in terms of a key enabler for us to be able to move. I cannot basically deploy a use cases, or I cannot basically push something to the customer unless it basically has the right governance and the right protocols of protection when it comes to the data. The data has to be sanitized. And the most important piece on this is basically that if I talk about security in general, security touch one of a critical item, which is it's important for all of us at the moment, which is the customer trust. Whatever we do at the moment, whatever we're trying to basically go personalization or go an AI at the end of the point, we want to get to the point where we can gain the customer trust. And this is what we're aiming to. The moment that you gain that trust, you'll be able to build a lot of relationship and start basically building the relationship gradually and push things. So that's what comes to the cybersecurity. And on the other hand, at the moment, what we do also on the compliance and the risk, we're trying also to ingest the right controls in place to be able to ensuring that the bank is well compliant with what we have in terms of regulation. And also when we look at the risk and assessment solution that we have on place at the moment, we try to also put some sort of data and AI on those projects. The idea is that not to deviate from what the other do. What we are trying to basically put cybersecurity as a part of our journey to make sure that everything runs under full control. And that's basically what we do at the moment. Yeah.
So it's cybersecurity which will bring trust, which is, I think, a very interesting aspect, because a lot of customers moved to digital banks when they started trusting them. Absolutely. Maytham, you heard since morning there seems to be a white space in Bahrain around SME. Now, given our product and design experience, what would you think bank can design and serve SME banking as a segment?
Thank you. So, look, within the SME sector, there's already been a lot of stuff done. Like, let me speak first of all in Bahrain, right? So within Bahrain, at least when it comes to parts of the digitization that we saw in the retail journey, we've started seeing it in the journey for SMEs. So quite a few banks by now have already digitized the onboarding, at least for single shareholder companies, right? So that use case has been solved, and any other bank who wants to solve it can easily do so. It's been tackled, and it's if you've got a retail onboarding process set up, it's not a big jump to do an individual establishment onboarding. There are challenges, obviously, when it comes to multi-shareholding companies. KYC requirements require us to look at shareholders, board members, authorized signatories. Theoretically, you could take all of them through your onboarding like you and do your ID&V and KYC as you would if you were onboarding them for an account. You can understand there are challenges associated with that. There's some lack of clarity in the law when it comes to things like templated board resolutions and these types of things. Some banks have been more aggressive on this. So typically, for example, Al Salam Bank is quite willing to, where you have lawyers, half of them come down with this opinion, half of them come down on that. They'll say, well, let's do it for the customer, right? So they've taken a few steps that frankly I think a lot of us would like to be able to take as well. And, hopefully that's kind of setting the trend for us and we'll be able to follow. So I think when it comes to the kind of non-risk services, like, account opening, offering accounting services standard, there's not really any challenge for SMEs to open an account in Bahrain, right? And a lot of them can open it digitally, right? So this is not a problem area that I've seen. When it comes to payments, yes, because the nature of banking, across the board, is that the bigger you are, the better the rates you get, right? So if you're someone who does large cross-border payments, etc., you're probably paying, a very thin margin on your FX. Whereas if you're an SME, a lot of the banks are still taking very substantial margins and they're feeling it. People have walked into this space, like BFC, for example, offers SME FX rates on this space. It's all being done manually. So I think this is an area that's ripe now. And I think within the next 12 months, 24 months, 36 months, we'll see this area being kind of solved to some level for SMEs. So you would have had kind of your transaction banking services to some extent done. On the trade finance area, people are still comfortable against cash. Some banks have already digitized issuance of LG, LC, et cetera, against cash, right? Or against pre-approved credit limits. So there's some work that's been done there. Where everyone has struggled is where we are introducing risk onto the balance sheet, right? So when it comes to approving fresh financing for SMEs, this is the use case area that we've not seen a lot of stuff done on. In the BDB, we did something. We did something called an express loan. It would allow you to apply digitally online and then would do a kind of summarized score, but you'd still have a manual check on it before you went ahead for dispersal. And the final stage of dispersal in terms of the contractual documents, we still have an issue. The country has issued an electronic signatory law. It's one of those areas where you speak to a set of lawyers, they come down on one side, speak to another set, they're on the other side. They feel there's not sufficient clarity. And, where you're taking on substantial debt under these contracts, knowing that they're going to be enforceable, especially where you're dealing with a high-risk category, is quite important. So in many cases, there's still a need to get that final wet signature. So I think as soon as you get a little bit of clarification around that law issued by the government, I think technology is there for doing DocuSign or for doing any kind of electronic signature around it. So I see that area is a place where we will see some resolutions. We've seen it also on other forms of de-risk financing, like when it comes to invoice discounting and these types of things, where it's done on an anchor-based invoice discounting approach. Because again, they're not taking on the SME risk. So as a general rule, where you're not taking on a lot of credit risk to the SME, there's been a lot of stuff done. There are actually solutions out there. Maybe they're not widely known, and maybe it's not marketed the same way as you'd see other things. But bear in mind, we're talking about a small segment with low ticket sizes within a small market. So one of the challenges you often find within the Bahrain market is a problem of scalability, right? So, if you take your numbers and you run the back of the envelope, and you say, okay, assuming I was going to do an average 10,000 dinar, 20,000 dinar loan to this many people, and my margin's going to be coming in at 2% or whatever it is this going to make sense? Is this going to be worth my while doing a lot of investment into? I think this is one of the challenges that we'll face.
So smarter approach is what Maytham is recommending. Deposit problem is solved and asset problem needs to be solved without building and investing a lot of dollars, right? I think that's where you're going. So we're out of time, but just last rapid fire question to each one of you. If you have to predict just one technology, yeah, and I'll start Maytham with you this time. Just one technology you believe banks should focus.
Rapid fire. Look, for me, I feel there's still a lot to be done in terms of data. And one of the challenges we face, I'm sure a lot of banks are facing, get me that data centralized in a data warehouse let me get access to it directly, and then give me the capability to easily build a front-end experience, through low-code or similar platforms. And my capability to rapidly roll things out increases exponentially, right?
So data and analytics. What about Abdul Majid, you?
I'll build on.
Might just go on.
Just one technology, you can.
I can't agree more on what you're saying on that. And again, data is not an option anymore; it's an imperative. And I guess we all we're not anymore need to advocate for it. I guess we've all been asked in a way or another to be basically bold on that area because this is what the future is. And again, having the data, I totally agree with him. This is what the journey started. With DAOing, again, I guess what one of the colleagues mentions that you don't look at the AI from the first things you start with. You look at things as a journey. You start with the data, building your team capabilities, and move all the way through. And this is, in my opinion, what's going to shape and redefine what the banks were going to do and offer. We talked a lot about personalization. We talked about automation. We talked about cryptos. We got all this kind of thing doesn't come from a day or two. It basically needs a team with the capability, and at the same time, you need the data that's in place to be able to build on top of it. So yeah, I totally
It's data.
Yeah, it's exactly that.
Sridhar, if you had to pick up one technology.
Yeah, I'm tempted to say AI, but I'll take it this way. One technology and one non-technology item that banks should focus on. AI and data, definitely banks should focus on. But I think what banks have missed out is not involving the customer more in their journeys. And this is not about customer-centric. A lot of lip service is paid to, we should be customer-centric, customer at the center, and so on and so forth. But what I'm suggesting is co-create with customers. There is no point being a 50-year-old and thinking like a 15-year-old when you have the 15-year-old available to think. Right? So banks has somehow get this mantle that we will think like a customer and create a journey when you can actually call customers and help them build the journey yourselves.
Interesting. So customer centricity and co-creation. Mr. Jamsheer?
Yeah, actually, I agree with all what they've said. It should start with the customer. It should be based on data, but I think AI-driven personalization is going to be the way forward.
Interesting. So I think it's a consensus among the panel, customer at the center and AI-driven data analytics. So that's what the panel believes will make the big difference in next 10 years. I think many thanks to everybody on the panel. A big round of applause to all of them.